Well, welcome back to another episode of Winning Through Culture. I'm really excited today to be with two special guests. My co-host Amanda Kramer is back in the studio with us. And our guest today is Jarod Latch. He is a co-founder of Spiracle Media, one of the best places to work in Charlotte. This is a part of our Best Places to Work, Great Companies series we've put together. So we're excited to be with you today, Jarod. Thank you for joining us.
Well, Tim, I appreciate it. I'm happy to be with you.
And what's also very exciting is we are not in our home studio. We are actually in Jarod's studio at Spiracle Media. So thanks for hosting us here and great setup. A few things for us to learn. So again, thanks for joining us today. So this is, as I mentioned, a part of a series we're doing on best places to work. We started an interview with TJ McCullough from the Charlotte Business Journal earlier in the spring of 2020. And we wanted to interview companies like yours, Jarod, that are perennial best places to work and just talk about the intentionality, the culture you've created, the challenges that inevitably come with creating a culture in a fast-growing company in a pretty dynamic and competitive field. And oh, by the way, there was this thing called COVID, which we've obviously talked about before, but clearly had an impact on your business. So I'm going to let Amanda lead most of our discussion today, as we like to do. And I'll turn things over to you, Amanda.
That's awesome. So for our listeners who might not be as familiar with Spiracle, and I know we'll reference it as that, but it's Spiracle Media, maybe you can share just a little bit about how that came to be. How did you go on this journey with your co-founder?
Well, it was about 11 years ago. So 2011, I was with Tim Bear, another individual, Bill Voth, and we were all in the sports media world. So we were here in Charlotte. We were sports anchors and reporters. I was at Channel 9, spent other time at WCNC. Bill was at Channel 9 as well. And Tim was at Spectrum News, or what is Spectrum News now. So we were all connected, and Tim was a roommate of mine. And if you saw the movie Old School, you could make comparisons that we were in a house that was somewhat like that. But what we would do, we would sit up at night, we'd have a beer and say, what do we want to do next? We knew that we wanted to stay in Charlotte, and in the media business, you've got to move around.
Yeah.
And we weren't ready to do that. We didn't want to uproot and go to another city along the journey. So we decided that, hey, why don't we look at starting a company? And what we settled on, because of what we were working with when it came to athletes, was helping them leverage their brand and build their social media presence. So that's what we landed on at first. And so Spiracle was born in 2011. We were focused on those relationships with athletes. Steph Curry was one of our first out of the gate because of connections we had to Davidson here locally. So we helped him for 3 years as he entered the NBA. Ricky Barnes was an Olympic swimmer as well that we helped in the 2012 games. He won a gold with Michael Phelps on the relay. And a couple years into that journey, we decided to pivot to all video content. And we brought in David Kernodle, who's our chief creative officer. And that really set the stage for where we are today.
So when you think about that journey, right, and it's continuing, so you're always evolving as companies that are growing as fast as yours do, you definitely had some core cultural principles, right, that you started with. And I'm sure those have evolved over time and have been elevated as you've brought on, as you've mentioned, a couple of people. Can you share with us a little bit more about what was the core there and then how that's expanded?
Certainly. And the core was really around one thing for us, because being in the TV news business is challenging. The hours are different. The quality of life, you're on an opposite schedule from everybody else.
Yeah.
So that was tough in itself. So I think around a core idea, and you've got to remember there was only 3 of us at the beginning. And, we went up in small increments and then sort of doubled here and doubled there. But in the beginning with that core was focused on quality of life. And we wanted whoever was going to work with us, either on the partner, which is what we call our clients, or somebody who's going to work for us from an employee standpoint, that we wanted to make sure that there was a quality of life, that there was a belief in family and significant others, and some flexibility. Certainly wanted to make sure we were committed to putting things forward at a high level, but we wanted to have that flexibility. Now that has evolved, but we've never lost that core. So we probably just build upon it. We went through what has been a really important exercise for us at the beginning of the pandemic in early 2020, in which we implemented EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. And what it allowed us to do was really encapsulate all these things that were already present in our team. things that we would later hire against and dismiss against.
Right.
But those are built around 4 key areas. The first is the team environment and play like a team. Everybody has to be bought into this collective success. And we're in a very collaborative environment creatively. And that's what people need to be fueled by. And they've got to take care of the person next to them. So that was number 1. Another big part is we're big on solutions. That can be, again, on the creative as we work in the video world or editing or how we deploy our resources, how we schedule meetings. We want you to get creative and bring solutions to the table because anybody can identify, as we know, the challenge or the problem.
Right.
Bring us a couple solutions so we can work through it together.
We've all been in those meetings.
Yes, we have.
It's always fun to have those people pointing the problem out with no solution.
I could do that as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Not that hard.
No.
And then the final 2 hinge on everybody moving things forward. So getting stuff done. And then the 4th is around positivity because as you know, it's a choice. So choose to be positive is a big part of our environment, for obvious reasons of how that deters or hurts others around you.
Well, and I know in just learning a little bit more about Spiracle, one of the things that you espouse is inviting your team members, your employees, whatever terminology you want to use there, to actually tackle issues collectively and together. So how does that show up? Because you spoke to a little bit from a core perspective. How does that show up daily, weekly in the, let's say, structure of EOS, which I love that you brought up because, as you know, and those of you who have listened, EOS is a large component of our organization as well. And it's great. So
there's a mix. There's a mix of those things. Within probably the last year, we implemented a daily huddle. So that daily huddle can't exceed 15 minutes. I'd say it's usually in the ballpark of anywhere to 7 to 9 minutes. It's where we get the entire team here and you're going to update everybody on a few of the highlights that are going to happen in your world for the next 24 hours. There is once a week a part where I reveal some key metrics across the organization. This includes some of our operations, what we use to measure bandwidth. It's also profitability, how many deals we've closed, what our close rate is, things like that come across. And so that's all taken in the daily huddle. And it also, there's an area for shout outs and challenges. So if Tim has something on his plate, it gives him the opportunity to bring it up. So then you can go offline and move something forward. So we do that daily. Then in a more formal setting, we have our L10 meetings and it works across different sections of our business. So on Monday, we have the production L10 where we have, I guess now probably in the area of 10 to 12 of our team. So over half of our team is in that L10 meeting where they're diagnosing issues together. They're encouraged during the week to put ideas, challenges, issues as we would think of them on that list so they can face them head on. We do the same thing at the leadership level. We do the same thing at marketing sales. And then another section of our business is our films offering. So Spiracle Films. So that really keeps the communication there immediate. And I think it's also prompted people. I've always been a huge proponent of just have the conversation
right
in person because we could remedy a lot of different misunderstandings.
Yes.
If you just went to somebody for, probably 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, you could have it done. Maybe even quicker in a minute. Oh, you didn't mean to, that's not how you felt. Oh, this is what was happening. Oh, we're good. That's how most of those would end. But in the formal setting, it is that weekly rhythm of meetings where we are looking at issues together. We're encouraged to have that conversation, and it has been very fruitful on our side.
And as you kind of expand from EOS, I think it's good to acknowledge the relationship that both you, Tim, meaning Tim Flanagan, because I know your co-founder is Tim as well. So making that distinction here, Tim Flanagan and yourself have in the C12 realm and how that kind of bleeds into, because there's a lot of tools and resources that you can pull into the organization to assist in what you were just discussing in the platform that is EOS.
There are. And, it's great for me just at a basic curriculum level every month within C12. I'm able to share those with certain individuals that are not necessarily key players within C12. But I'm able to take that content. I'm able to discuss it with a leadership team. I was just talking to an individual a little bit earlier about some resources. I was watching videos on anxiety, chronic anxieties and triggers and things like that and going through exercises. And that's through Right Now Media, which is a part of our membership, which just has a wealth of opportunity for not only learning, but just understanding more things at a more in-depth level. And so it works its way into the conversation. And that day with C12 for me is one of the best days of my month where I can step away from everything and look at everything from a faith perspective, family, and work perspective all in one place, which has been fantastic. And it's been transformative for me as a leader, just in the way that I'm then activated, the way I view things, just the way I can sit back and I wouldn't say be more calculated. That almost sounds like a detrimental word, but I'm able to see them different in a good way.
More intentional.
Yes, that's a good word, intentional.
I had the good fortune of actually doing a podcast recently with Buck Jacobs, founder of C12. What a rich experience. That could have been 3 hours long.
It might turn into...
Well, it may turn into that, yeah.
I can only imagine.
There may be more than one episode of that one.
It was inspirational for sure.
It was great. But you somewhat answered this, Jarod, but I am curious from standpoint of a person in C12, and since we've talked about that in Winning Through Culture podcast in previous episodes, there's some context there, but what are maybe one or two of the key things you think that experience has afforded you to provide for your people in your culture?
Well, I think a significant one is our care team that was born last year. And to me, when I look back at almost 11 years of business ownership and the different things that you can put up there as successes, I right now look at our care function within our organization as the number one thing that we have done right.
That's powerful.
And I mean that when I look around, and it has two functions, internal and external facing. Internal is just taking care of people inside, having an awareness or celebrating the most basic things like birthdays or the birth of a child, things that come in common life. And then there's the other aspect of that, of external, volunteering, serving in the community. We've worked together with the YMCA. We worked with another organization north of Charlotte to renovate a playground for preschool kids last year on a Saturday morning. So to me, it's those things that are invaluable with bringing your team together, but also playing a role and to me a responsibility of giving back. And we weren't always able to do that and probably just unclear on the best way to do that. And I go back to your word intentional. We're at a point where that is very intentional on our side for just a number of different reasons, but number one being it's the right thing to do. And I'm most proud of that has come out of that.
That's great. Yeah. A lot of great resources in C12, and the whole model of the care team is clearly what makes a business unique. Again, in a world that sometimes people come together, they do their job and they leave, and in talking about the best places to work and Spiracle Media being a repeat winner, that takes a lot of intentionality.
Appreciate that.
So you spoke to a little bit of how you and your co-founder, Tim, have invested in the culture throughout Spiracle's history. And you're most proud, like as you just said, of the care team. Are there other ways in which you would acknowledge for business owners or entrepreneurs that are at different phases of their business life cycle that they could invest in a culture just kind of from your learning and experience?
I think the biggest one for me is having some sort of company retreat that is offsite. We do this every year. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you could say it's painful with a pocketbook, but to me, it's worth every dollar that we spend to go away. This year, we will be going down to Clemson, South Carolina. It's usually somewhere within the region. So we've gone to Hilton Head before. We've been to Charleston. We've been up to Charlottesville. So we've been to a lot of different places in the mountains as well, in Western North Carolina. But we're going to take our entire team, which is at 21 members right now. It's as large as we have been. And we'll go away for 2.5 days. And that'll be a mix of different things that happen. So just to give you a general idea, we'll go down Wednesday morning. One of Tim Bear's favorite things is a scavenger hunt that we do on the way.
Nice.
And so he'll have that set up, hopefully, in time for everybody to go. And then we'll meet at a hotel down there. We have a conference room for an opening session that afternoon. We're going to go on a hike. We'll have a dinner. Thursday then is about 8 or 9 in the morning till 4, where we'll have content and programming, and different people will lead different sessions. And we want to look at just what are the big things that we can all be focused on. There's a lot of personal growth, business growth. There are different mechanisms within the company that need updates around. We'll go through those on Thursday. We'll go out to dinner. We'll have fun. Friday, we'll have a session, and then we'll have an activity day where people can either select to go fishing, they can go go-karting and mini golf, they can play regular golf. So there'll be different options for people. And that's pretty much how this has been, set up over the last couple of years. But to me, at any size company, that is something that is critical because we leave re-energized. It's a time that we don't get when we're in the work environment. No matter what you want to do, where people can bond, get to know each other better, and just focus on the big picture of why we're all in this together. Why do we come in here and work? And what is it worth for all of us? And it's for everybody to succeed. And that means succeeding in different ways. But this helps us identify it. It helps us to better understand one another. And it'll certainly be, the team building exercise. But we also want to be very strategic, and align that with something that's important as well. So our theme this year will be one company, one Spiracle. So when we look at our processes, even in a company of 21, there are walls that form.
Oh, yeah.
And we want to break those walls down. And so that's going to be the mission and the message for this year's retreat. But to me, that type of experience with your team set up correctly, with some guardrails,
right,
is very important.
Now, that's a great investment to make in your people. I also love that you do it during the week, so you're not asking them to give up a weekend with their families. And it sounds like it's a very powerful experience for all of your people.
It is. And I take away as much as anyone else.
Of course.
And I will have a couple sessions that I lead, but I love to just sit and observe and listen. And that's my role in that spot. And have a beer with someone and talk about their family. Those are the wins of being together in that environment.
That's great.
Well, and I think too, for those that are listening, again, they're going to be at different sizes of organization. They might be a solo individual at this time and looking to grow from a business owner perspective. And that clearly didn't start out as let's have 20 plus people go and do all these things together. So can you give a little perspective of what it looked like the first time you did it versus now?
The first time we did it, we had 5 people. I would say that it didn't really change all that much.
Okay.
We really built on the same sort of structure. Learning's always been important. So I think for the solopreneur that you speak to, some things that they can do is just get involved with different groups, be around other business owners. We've had a really good relationship with EO Charlotte for a number of years and served as a strategic alliance partner. Tim is a member there as well, Tim Bear. And just being around individuals with the goal to learn. Because I think we can get in these networking environments and people just think this is a transactionary environment. I think that's the complete wrong way to look at it. You've got to look at who can you learn from and where are you? Where are you putting in yourself in a position to get better? And that's what, limited company, if it's just you by yourself or if you got a few people, there's creative ways to do it. But I think you've got to really look at what your goal is. Is it camaraderie? Is it some learning? Is it, hey, we have these really big issues that we need to tackle. So we could lock ourselves in a room for 2 days and that's all you need to do. So I think there's great flexibility in it. But I think one mistake you can make is not having enough guardrails.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you've mentioned Tim Bear quite a few times, right? As you talk about the history and the growth and the future of Spiracle. And I think it's really interesting and exciting that he was recently named one of the most admired CEOs, which Tim Flanagan also has been named. So it's
Tim and Tim.
Tim and Tim.
Must be a Tim thing.
Must be a Tim thing.
Bias towards the Tims.
So as it relates to Tim and Spiracle, and that recognition, what does that mean for Spiracle now? Like, how is that going to kind of precipitate in the organization?
I think it symbolizes the momentum that we have. Charlotte is super important to us. It's where we call home. It's the types of companies that are moving here, that have been here, and those relationships that mean the most to us. So I think it shows just to the work that he's done, plugging himself in to Charlotte, on the entrepreneurial community, to making it a point to make sure that we maintain our culture and that we do things the right way. And I think that award also, to me, really exemplifies his ability to vision out and tackle the big things and think about things ahead of when somebody else is going to come and say, oh, this is the thing.
Right.
And usually he's figured that out a year before. Now, whether we were quick enough to activate is a different story, but his ability to identify, what's next puts him in that discussion and well worth the recognition that he has gotten on that front.
Agreed.
No, I mean, it's a great honor for him and Spiracle. And I think it's, to your point, Jarod, it really is a recognition of all of the effort you have put into building this company. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to the story and I've known parts of the story, but all the way back to sitting down and trying to figure out you're in a profession that you know is going to require to move multiple times, disrupt your life, your family. At that point, did you have a family? And envisioning what could we do with these great skills that we've acquired? What do we know? What do we love? And what's important to us, which is we want to stay in Charlotte. We want to have a better quality of life. So it's just great when you hear an entrepreneur story like this to build upon, all the decisions that go into it. I think too many times people think, oh, it's an overnight success, or you got lucky, or, and maybe there's a little luck in there, but you create most of it. So I just kudos to both you and Tim for the effort that you've put forth to build Spiracle Media into the company that it is.
I appreciate that. There's certainly luck along the way. I've always said that we were in the right time at the right moment, and we were equipped with the skills, as you mentioned, from being in TV, especially when it came to digital media and social media, all those things we had to adopt ourselves along the way. So we were on the front of the curve that whole time. So it gave us a leg up in terms of knowledge and how to execute, but we did have to go and look for a practical way to apply it. And that was important.
So you mentioned this, but we've had some unique, as what I will call them, challenges over the last couple of years, right? So in a business that is very relationship driven, collaborative, as you mentioned previously, what are some of the challenges that you didn't even know you might be facing? And maybe how did you approach a couple of those?
I think the biggest challenge for us is we have to be on the ground to tell real stories from an execution standpoint, from a production standpoint. And we learned early on that we were reliant on these companies that were just sitting there. They didn't know what to do yet. They were reluctant either with funds or to get people together. There was a lot of different reasons why they weren't activating. So we had to jump into action. And it's something I think we did on day 2 or even 3 or maybe 1, day 0. Our creatives got together and it wasn't, okay, this is what we can't do. It's what can we do? And so they went to work trying to figure out, okay, here's our roster of partners. How can we bring value to them in this moment? Because we know they still have a need to get a message out. And video didn't lose any of its ability to be powerful or anything like that as a tool. You could argue that it became even more. Yeah, it became even more powerful. So how could we enable all these partners and people that are going to come forward and help them? So part of that was building out remote kits that we sent out. So we would do remote interviews to try to be better than Zoom quality, which doesn't take much, maybe a light and a generic microphone. You could do better than Zoom.
All of us have learned that in the last 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was part of it. Other parts were the office, we mentioned the collaborative environment. The thing for us is that we were only out of the office for, I think it was 6 weeks. And then people said, we want to be back together. And thankfully, with the size of our team and the square footage of our office, we were able to do that in a safe way. But people were essentially begging us to be like, hey,
I don't want to work from home.
I don't want to work from home. And I didn't either.
I want to be here.
Yeah, I didn't either. I'm very unproductive at home. I can't. I've got 3 little kids at home. One's at school, but then they end up all being there. And I feel this struggle as a dad of, sure, I do want to go out and shoot basketball with you. Yes, I'd love to go to the pool, but daddy's got to work.
Dad's got an appointment.
So it was that tug of war. So we were back in the office pretty quickly, which was good. Other challenges, I guess a lot of them I just try to block out of my mind.
Well, going back to your positivity comment from earlier, right? Like choosing to have that outlook, I think is
learning.
Really,
learning
nonetheless
learning. But
you're right.
All that other stuff, I was going to, hopefully I resolved it and just packed it away and maybe I'll have a bonfire later and we can get rid of it all.
I like to say, Jarod, you're like cornerback in the NFL. You got to forget the last play and get your head in the game for the next play.
Yep, next play and next man up.
Yep, no doubt.
So we talk a lot about being a best places, and I'm putting places in air quotes because I know you can't see me, but putting places in air quotes to work. So when you talk about being a best place to work, and this is an ongoing development journey, as we talked about learning along the way, what are some of the learnings that maybe you've received from, when your employees actually go through that process to evaluate the organization that you've come back and said, hey, here is something we absolutely, need to work on in a future state, or here's something that clearly we're doing really well, but we don't want to do it so well that we don't give it any attention anymore?
I think the communication and the family part are up there high.
Yeah.
they wouldn't dispute that. I think an area that we've tried to be diligent in working on is professional personal development. I think the care team's part of that. I think equipping our managers with extra knowledge and different tactics that they can deploy has been important as well. Because I know for me, I've flipped my mindset significantly over the last couple of years on one really key area. I used to look at weaknesses and get sidetracked by people's weaknesses. Well, there's a reason why they're here. And to me now, it's to build on their strengths. And that has that's been a paradigm shift for me, or a seismic shift in terms of my thinking. And it's getting everybody to work together to build off each other's strengths. Because when we do that, everybody succeeds. And yes, if weaknesses are a major disruption, then they need attention. Other than that, I've essentially been leaving them alone for the most part and really saying, okay, what are they really good at? Are they in their right seat right now? The whole Jim Collins thing, but looking at it based on strengths. Should they be doing something else that can bring everything up together? And so that's an area that I think building off of professional development is just working with people one-on-one to identify those strengths. I mean, if you've got too many weaknesses, then maybe you don't belong here, but that's a different story. But you are here, and we've decided that we've measured you against core values, culture, the number one things of getting you in the door. Okay, and we're aware of your hard skills as well. What are you really good at? And how can we put you in the best position to succeed personally? Because if you do that, it all works together. So for me, that's been a big shift for me in the last couple of years that I get excited about.
Well, and there was a school of thought in management years ago that said, you got to identify people's weaknesses and work on their weaknesses. And I remember John Maxwell years ago saying, all you're going to do is get a little better in things you're not good at at the expense of not investing in the things you are really good at. That's a great point. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to see, I think, for the most part, that school of thought in business today has changed, with the Strengths Finder tool from the Gallup organization and other areas that have really said, hey, get your people together. Back to the football analogy, you don't want a cornerback acting as the quarterback. And you probably got some better basketball analogies sure than I do. But, it definitely is, I think, a key thing that we all have weaknesses, but our contribution to the team is going to be through our strengths.
And that's where the awareness you must have. So we can't negate weaknesses altogether. I mean, we're working on them all the time as business owners. We're trying to find exactly what those are and extract them and figure out how we can be better, or what are they disrupting? How do we manage our weaknesses?
Typically, it's how is my weakness disrupting my team, and how do I mitigate that? And again, where I'm weak, find someone that's strong and collaborate with them and partner with them on that. Not just think because I'm the leader that's, weak or inappropriate, but in fact can be extremely empowering to the other person.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun to see people, build upon their strengths and find success than to flounder in weaknesses and sometimes behaviors that are not going to change.
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Tim, you might want to share a little bit. You were on a run recently, which I know we always say on Winning Through Culture, because a lot of our ideas, I'll say collective ideas, come from a run thought that you have. So when you think about the concept of if there is a weakness or an issue, there's something.
Oh, yes. You're prompting me here. Thank you.
I'm glad that you were out running too.
Yes.
So I commend you on that.
Well, I'm glad we're not on video, because if you looked at me, you wouldn't think I ran, but I do run. And don't run enough, I guess. No, I was on a run actually listening to an Andy Stanley podcast this past weekend. And speaking of EOS, for those that know EOS, a component of EOS is IDS, which is exploring for solutions to problems. And we spent a lot of time in our firm. We have multiple L10s in the span of a week, and Amanda and I are in a couple of them, more than one. And so there's a lot of conversation about solving problems. And we specifically in our organization, I led a conversation in the last quarter. Our quarterly is actually next week, around an issue that we were trying to solve for. And fortunately, I heard a podcast that helped liberate me a little bit. And Andy Stanley was talking about, because apparently they use EOS as well, there are problems you can solve for, which means there's a solution. And there are issues that create tension that must be managed. And I was very liberated. I actually stopped and sent it to Amanda and said, hey, listen to this. It's only 15 minutes, but it's a great concept, because I realized specific to that particular group, we were trying to solve for a problem that doesn't have a solution. It's just a tension that needs to be managed inside of that team. And so I get my best ideas, it seems, when I run. So I just need to run more.
It's a fantastic perspective.
Yeah. Well, and as we think about best places to work and how our collective organization comes to the decision, right, to provide their feedback in that platform. And then as an end result, we are very lucky that we have been part of the best places to work nominations and then also being selected, year over year. I think a lot about that those individuals that were part of that particular L10, they're looking at us from a leadership or a business owner or an entrepreneur standpoint to say, okay, what is the solution? And having that distinguishing idea that some things will have a solution and some things are simply attention to be managed too. So being that we're putting that out there, that is one of the great things I think about. We're talking about weaknesses and what have you, that you can share something very authentically and say, there is not a solution for this. And that's okay. That's totally fine. Let's focus our energy on what we can solve for and how we can, make a difference and ultimately be the most impactful leader we can be.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in thinking through the story of Spiracle Media, I just want to recap what I've heard today, Jarod, because I think it's great. You had a vision. You came together with other like-minded people that obviously clearly had some similar values and a similar desire to have a better quality of life and apply their skills. You were very intentional about the type of people you wanted to hire and the type of individual you wanted to have as a part of your business. That intentionality led to a intentionality around creating a culture that puts people first and puts the care of the person as an individual and a professional, invests in them, not just, to help them be more productive in work, but to help them be a better human being and to be a more successful professional. Again, the intentionality of the retreat, which I love. I've often thought about that. We have ourselves now over 40 employees. It's a daunting thought, but I love that you do that. And then I think it's really neat that you're involved in C12, which is a organization very similar to EO. The difference being it's a Christian-based orientation where I'll say EO is just a more secular, not good or bad, just a different orientation, but both of which are very intent on helping business owners be more successful in what they do. And, here you are, multiple best places to work nominee and recognized as such. Tim Bear's been the CEO of the year, which is a big recognition in Charlotte, as fast growing city it is, and in the competitive field you're in. And we didn't talk about all the success you've had as a company, but that I think has probably been a byproduct of all of the things you've done to get yourselves to where you are in the last, 11 years now. It's a really great story. And I just commend you and your partners and the rest of your team for what you've done. And I can certainly speak on behalf of our organization, which has become a client of Spiracle Media, and you're helping us with our rebrand. You guys have done a fantastic job, and it's nice to partner with an organization that has similar values to ours and again, is trying to achieve the same thing. It made it a lot easier to work with you because you immediately appreciated what we were trying to accomplish in a rebrand, which wasn't some fancy story that razzmatazz, but really tapped into the humanity and the people that ultimately drive a company and a business. So again, kudos to you and well done.
I appreciate that. And it's neat to hear you talk that back to me. So I may have to have you write a blog. I may enlist your services so that you can spin that back. I can proof it. I enjoy that stuff.
That's what Amanda does for me. I have thoughts.
It is neat to hear that because one thing I've been on lately is it's all about the experience of working with us. And that starts with our people.
Yes.
And that I feel like I can let the work speak for itself, but that's just the byproduct, like you said, of the rest of the core and everything else. It's the people and the function and the service aspect. We're a service company. We end up having a product at the end of the day, but we are a service business and we want to serve our partners in that way.
Yeah, you serve others, you serve them well. And again, I think that's the interesting aspect and why, winning through culture, so much of what we try to tap into is, as long as I've been in business, there's plenty of people that say, just have the best product or the fastest product or the cheapest product or whatever. And all the emphasis is not on the people, which is really ultimately the culture. It's on the product or the transaction. And for a while, they may have the best product. It may be the, most competitive product or service, but it's not sustainable because the people that are providing that every day are probably turning over on a frequent basis, are not as fully engaged. And I think that's, again, the beauty of what you guys have accomplished in being recognized as the best place to work multiple times is you've proven the sustainability of a focus on culture and people. And in the end, they deliver a great service and a great product to all your clients.
That's awesome. So from a parting words perspective, you have, as we have mentioned multiple times in this podcast, Spiracle Media has been a best places to work multiple times, right? So why is, in your own words, Spiracle Media a best place? And I'm going to say a great place to work.
Spiracle Media is a great place to work because we have found the right people, the people that believe that it is important to be a part of a team and to really work collaboratively and build each other up. That's the key. Because if you don't have people that want to build others up, then to me, you have nothing and you have something that isn't sustainable. But for us, it is choosing and having the right people come to us to want to be a part of this organization.
That's awesome. So for all of you listening, we hope that you found this episode of Winning Through Culture impactful and relevant, no matter where you are in your journey of building your business. And Jarod, thank you so much for being a guest with us and just the collective conversation. This was a fun one. They're all fun, but in their own way.
They're all fun, but it's just great to see the themes and as, the foundation you built. And we'll put a link to Spiracle Media in our show notes because, again, you have, obviously, in the work you're in, producing video, you have quite the impressive website.
Agreed.
And, something for
to
all of us to aspire
I think.
to.
Yeah.
Yes. We have one piece of it now with the video you created for our team. Now we're looking at everything else saying, boy, we got to up our game. Even your podcast studio you so graciously let us use today. We got some great ideas out of that too. So again, thanks everybody for being with us on another episode of Winning Through Culture. Until then, be impactful, be relevant, be well.